So, welcome to everyone, friends and classmates, as we kick off another year of Zoom sessions. And we begin this year with Bryan Hickman talking about how he is making a difference after 65 with a current passion. Bryan grew up in a Brighton suburb of Rochester, New York, and attended public schools and then the private Allendale School for Boys. Bryan's father was a Kodak scientist with over 200 patents, including means to recover silver from film and vacuum technologies to extract. He didn't inherit his father's genius. However, he hopes he has his mother's longevity genes. Bryan was my roommate at Williams. He majored in economics, graduated with highest honors, and went on to study development economic and public policy at the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton. He received an Army Direct Commission, serving in the West Wing of the White House, where he helped to design and implement the lottery system that replaced the draft in 1970. If only that lottery system could have been in place in 1967, it probably would have saved a lot of stress on most of us. A few weeks after he arrived in Washington, he became my wife's roommate while I was on an Army base in Baltimore. Thanks, Bryan. Following Army service and some positions in public policy consulting, he returned to Rochester, New York, worked 10 years for a small multinational firm, and then turned around several failing companies, including a small bus manufacturer where he was CEO and significant shareholder. He sold his shares in the bus manufacturer in 2011 and looked for new opportunities to use his turnaround skills. Bryan is married for 42 years to Beth, an accomplished horticulturist, and has 2 daughters, including a Williams grad and 2 grandchildren. As you will hear, Bryan chose to support the charter school model to improve the learning outcomes of inner city Rochester students. Bryan is passionate about the subject and will discuss the successes and challenges, as well as some reasons for unsatisfactory performance. So Bryan, take it away.
Thank you, Harry. It's a pleasure to see so many classmates show up on at least around here, cold winter day. Williams was the perfect college for me. I would not have done well on a big city campus. And actually, as a father of our classmate, Jim Allen, who was the big influence in persuading me that Williams was the right place for me. So many thanks to the Allen family. I had no idea what I wanted to major in or what I wanted to do as a career. So the good liberal arts education was exactly what I needed to expose me to a wide range of interesting avenues and much needed maturing, both academically and socially, as a Skidmore gal who named her fetal pig Brian could attest. I found direction my junior year when I started to focus on development economics, which I pursued further at Princeton and had an internship the summer of 1968 in Liberia with our foreign aid program. I had a job with them lined up for my graduation, but my draft board wouldn't defer me. And the irony is that USAID would have sent me to Laos, and the Army sent me to Washington in civilian clothes. From there, my career went in a completely different direction, as Harry has just described. And now my late life career has brought me full circle to address poverty, but here in Rochester, not internationally. So picking up where Harry left off, the bus company needed about 6 months to raise the money to buy my shares, so I couldn't buy another company. And I used the time to do some soul searching. What did I really want to do with the rest of my life? Did I really want to take the risks of buying another bankrupt company at that age? I had enough money. My two daughters were launched and earning their own way in the world. And maybe I could find a way to help people less fortunate, particularly children. So one day I went to a community event where the state was proposing in different regions to give up to $40 million per region to come up with something really transformative that would spark economic growth. And so there were a whole lot of people in this big room. And as I listened, all the suggestions were things that any sophomore in any city in the country could come up with. There was nothing new ideas, nothing breakthrough that would be transformative. So I decided to go home and write myself a paper on what might be transformative. And my research indicated that strong regions have strong regional cores and strong institutions that support civic success. Rochester is the core of our region, but the population of the city has shrunk from 340,000 to about 210,000, with the suburbs having over 600,000 people. The businesses have moved out of downtown. It's dilapidated and crime-ridden. Fewer than 10% of all public school kids in the city schools were at grade level, and almost 70% of them tested below basic, meaning they were 3 or 4 years behind where they should be. You know, how do you have a strong economy and good neighborhoods if the people who live there can't even earn a living? It was obvious. You can come up my next slide here. Yeah, the only way for Rochester to transform itself is to educate its school-age children. That's the only route out of poverty for them and the only way up for our region. Education is the only major social problem in our city that I felt I could actually do something about. Nothing had to be invented or discovered. The funding was there. We merely had to do what good educators already knew how to do. It was more an organization and management problem than a how to educate kids problem. Someone had told me about charter schools, the idea that groups of educators, citizens, and parents could band together to open state-supported public schools in needy areas. While the charter schools get a lot less money than district schools, in New York, they actually get enough to run a good school. They're held to all the requirements for student achievement, but are given the autonomy and freedom from bureaucracy needed to do a good job. Chartering provides citizens a way to redeploy public dollars to a more effective use. Take kids out of bad schools and put them in good schools. So the first thing I did was meet with the superintendent of schools. I told him I just turned around several bankrupt companies, and I suggested that the school district was functionally bankrupt. It was awash in money, but it was turning out a really crappy product. I was willing to work for free to help turn it around. He told me he couldn't use me because I wasn't an educator. And I had the effrontery to look him straight in the eye. And I said, if fewer than 10% of your kids are at grade level, you're not much of an educator either. I plan to open a lot of charter schools and just take your kids away. I'm awed at what so many of my classmates have done in devoting their lives to education. And you know far more than I do. So the obvious question is, why did I think I could impact something that thousands of educators in Rochester were failing to do? The answer is that any of us can do something if we really set our sights on doing it, if we work hard and smart, and if we build strong teams of knowledgeable people to support us. The large city school districts are structured for failure because they're so encrusted with regulations, political pressures, and special interests that nobody can actually fix things. They don't empower principals to run their own schools. There's no reward for exceptional performance and no consequence for poor performance. So the incentives are all wrong. And a bad system will defeat good people any day of the week. There are many good people in the school system, but they're trapped. The answer, in my opinion, was build a new system alongside and just replace the old one. So when I got involved, Rochester already had 7 charter schools. In early 2012, I teamed up with a dozen like-minded people and formed a not-for-profit we now call Edceptional, with me as unpaid executive director. Our idea was to recruit some of the nation's highest performing charter school management organizations, called CMOs, to open schools in Rochester, people with a proven track records and the knowledge to open and run good schools. Over the course of several years, I visited more than 120 schools in 33 cities. I read at least 200 books on education, attended conferences all over the country, met with key people in all the major foundations, and I took a Harvard course in educational leadership. A charter management organization in Los Angeles called Partnerships to Uplift Communities, which they abbreviate to PUC, or PUC schools for short, attracted our attention. An energetic fourth grade teacher named Jackie Elliott had started a middle school on a shoestring. Over a decade, PUC schools had grown to be a network of middle and high schools with more than 5,000 students and an amazing student success rate, continuing through college graduation. 82% of their graduates went to college, and 80% of them finished with a 4-year degree. We loved the school culture and how everyone in the schools was committed to excellence. And it took a lot of persuading and a big push from the Gates Foundation, but they agreed to open a school in Rochester. In the meantime, we came across a couple who ran some very high-performing charter schools in Cleveland, and they had just won a Next Generation Learning Grant from the Gates Foundation to open a truly innovative high school for teenage boys, who are the most poorly served demographic in most cities. Because New York provides far more funding per pupil than Ohio, we persuaded them to come to Rochester, and the school would be named Virtus, with me as founding board chair. Now, one challenge was finding adequate facilities. But this one's a little better than the last one. My partner in this effort, Joe Klein, called us. He had found an empty church building that would be perfect for PUC. But if we wanted to buy it, we'd have to act immediately. And oh gosh, he was a little short of cash at the moment. So I lent $300,000 to our not-for-profit to buy it. You can see the church is in the middle. You can see all the additions on either side. He had estimated it take about $800,000 to renovate the building, but it turned out it took $1.5 million. So very soon, a group of us were raising money and guaranteeing bank loans to get the school in. I got really immersed in all this, and I was working with the PUC and the Virtus people, writing 300-page applications to get charters for the two very different schools, forming boards for the schools, going to Albany for interviews, and getting the charters approved. I also had to find and fix up rented space for Virtus, and the school leaders had to hire teams and put everything together to launch the schools. Joe and I talked with heads of many more CMOs about coming to Rochester. They all required multi-million-dollar upfront commitments that we couldn't make. And they're also worried whether we could provide enough students. So no other big CMOs came to Rochester. But in the meantime, other people were opening charter schools or adding grades and students to their existing schools. So the charter sector continued to grow. Since Joe had a day job, I ended up managing the renovation of the PUC building and expanding it another 30,000 square feet, which is the part you saw on the left. I also devoted a lot of time getting Virtus up and running. And after 2 years, moving it into an old manufacturing building, you just see the entrance to it. There are no windows, not much to look at, because it was a factory. We spent the first weeks at Virtus on setting expectations for student behavior and academic success. It ended up taking 6 months to get the school culture right. For the second year, the new students followed the lead of the older students and adapted almost immediately to a great learning environment. I remember talking to a student the second week of our first year, and I asked him about his aspirations. He answered, "I don't have any, I'll be dead." My brother's been shot. I probably will be too. I don't even know why I'm here. Fortunately, when he came to believe we were serious about giving him a future, he came around and he did graduate. As part of our effort to provide parents with the type of schools they wanted, we conducted focus group interviews with city parents. Turned out they didn't know what a charter school was. They didn't know it was a public school. They didn't know why they'd want to put their child in one. The unions and the union teachers and everything kept telling them that charter schools were terrible and kept feeding them a continuous stream of misinformation and vitriol, claiming that charter schools are ruining public education. A lot of people seem to believe them. So we obtained some grant money to start a website we call goodschoolsrock.org. It provides parents with detailed information on each of the charter schools and provides a simple application form that parents can fill out online and apply to schools of their choice with just a couple of clicks. We support the website with extensive radio and social media advertising, and we publish a school selection booklet that we send every home with a page on each charter school. You can see that this is bearing fruit. We now have 27 schools with more than 8,500 kids, and the district has shrunk to fewer than 20,000 kids in K through 12. So we're approaching 30% of the public schools. And actually this year we have 40% of all the kindergartners are now in charter schools. So you can see where this is leading. Just for comparison, New Orleans is 100% charter schools. Indianapolis is almost 60%, including some schools they call innovation schools. Washington, D.C. is about 50%. And to the best of my knowledge, there are about 17 cities with more than a third of their kids in charter schools. So Rochester's charter school sector offers parents a wide choice of schools, as shown on this slide. Let me explain that each school organization has its own board and management team. Some have multiple school buildings and some stand alone as single schools. Their enrollments reflect the demographics of the city. 90% of the kids are Black or brown. 90% qualify for free or reduced price meals, which is how they measure poverty. And the schools all feed them 2 meals a day for free. Nobody's charged. And they're about the same percentages of special ed students and English language learners. Confounding the union critics, Virtus has 30% of its schools come classified as special ed. So it proves we're open to everybody. We take everybody. And the other thing they say is that schools kick them out. I did a survey of all the charter schools in Rochester. In the last 2 years, there were only 7 kids who were expelled. So Virtus has been a great success, and I want to be clear. My organization, Exceptional, does not operate any of these charter schools. We're an independent support organization. We support all of the schools. We've got a budget about $700,000, which we hope to take up to $1.5 million in the next year or two, and to provide support efforts. So my position as board chair of Virtus when the school opened was separate from this organization. Virtus has been a great success, but the Puck School was closed because it did not live up to expectation under Joe's leadership. I was left holding the bag on $5 million of bank loans and loans from 30 wealthy individuals who we persuaded to invest in increments of $100,000 and collectively had lent $4 million, including quite a lot from us. After an intense effort, when Puck closed, I was able to sell the building to Uncommon Schools. And after further expansion, it now houses the highest performing high school in Rochester. Unfortunately, the investors lost almost $3 million, and I took a pretty hefty bath on my loans. But at the end of a 10-hour day, as we were trying to get this deal completed, and they wanted everything in the school clean and out, and I was doing it myself. I had what the doctor called an uncompleted heart attack. So I now have a stent and numerous bottles of pills. I'm very fortunate that I don't have any permanent damage to my heart. So I've been able to continue full steam ahead. But, I used to say I put my heart into this effort, but I didn't mean to do it quite so literally. The neat thing is that more kids are learning because of what we've been doing. Now, I'm missing a page in my, oh, here it is in my talk. So the last few years, we realized we were advertising good schools rock. But that wasn't accurate. This chart shows the percentages of students proficient in English, what's now called English Language Arts or ELA, for each school. You can't read all the detail here, but what you can see is the city school district is way over on the left. And this is 4 years of testing. So the blue and the orange are 2018 and 19. And then there was no testing during the pandemic in 1920 and 21. And then the next two show 22 and 23. And of course, the 22 scores are all depressed because kids just starting to come back after the pandemic. There was an awful lot of learning loss due to that. So you can sort of see on the left are some schools not performing terribly well, working your way across to some of the high performers. And, but way on the right, first you see the New York State average, which is just a bit over 50%, which is pretty terrible to think half the kids in New York aren't getting the education they need. And on the far right are a couple of schools in New York City where proficiency rates are very high. And I put them in to show that this is what's possible. There's a group of schools called Success Academies. I've got a couple of them here. They've got 47 schools with over 20,000 kids, and more than 90% of the kids are proficient in every grade and every subject in all 47 schools. So, so that's what we're trying to do. So the next slide shows the same thing for math. And, oh, go back. There. And so one of the things I wanted to call attention to is the one I've circled. And this was a charter school in Rochester, which had gone along with pretty poor performance for 7 or 8 years, was in danger of being closed. They finally got rid of their principal and they promoted a young woman from within. And in just 4 years, she's gone from, in math, here it is, she's gone from 18% of the students proficient. In 2022, it was 45%. And this last year in 2023, that tall yellow column is 83% of the kids in the entire school were proficient in math. And it just proves that rapid change is possible. If you've got good leaders who build a strong team and implement what Rick Ackerley and others in our class could tell you is how you run a good school, you can get that kind of result even with poor inner city kids. So a couple of years ago, one of the key people in Exceptional, my nonprofit support organization, quit suddenly. And luckily, one of our board members said he would like the job. A man named Sebron Johnson had spent 10 years as vice president of operations for the Urban League of Rochester. And before that, had been a tech entrepreneur in New York City. And he had a passion for education. And he's breathed new life and energy into our organization. His connections throughout the city, he's pastor of downtown church. And he's now our CEO, and I'm now the vice president. But we're thought partners. We work well together. And it happened that his arrival at Exceptional coincided with our 55th reunion in Williamstown. So I was talking with a lot of classmates about how do you achieve excellence? And I got some good advice. And in particular, our classmate, Rick Ackerley, who's had a 45-year career leading schools to excellence, emphasized the importance of school culture and strong leadership. And so that's where I ought to focus. Underperformance of a school is a sign that the leadership team's weak, because a strong team knows how to get the culture and the education right. This is very helpful. So in the past 18 months, we've developed two new programs. One initiative is provide two expert teacher coaches to two schools. These coaches are training school personnel and teaching literacy following the now proven science of reading, and also in doing observations of classrooms to give feedback to teachers real time, day after day, and improve their classroom management skills as well as pedagogy. The project's in the pilot stage, but we're collecting data on student progress in the 12 affected classrooms. And we think we can improve that with the right approach, we can make another school make rapid improvement. Other focus is leadership and culture. We've helped schools recruit more board members. We've developed 3 videos for orienting new board members to their jobs and for recruiting board members. We've brought board members together in Rochester to discuss and share ideas, but also we're going to other cities to learn what's happening there. So we took a group to Indianapolis last year. We're taking a group to New Orleans this year. And an important but unstated part of having board members from all the schools meet together is peer pressure. So the members from the low performers are seeing what the high performers are doing, and we hope it helps them do better. So I got one more chart here. Here's where a real challenge is. I'm only showing charter schools with students in grades 3 to 8. And but over 90% of all the kids got tested, so it's pretty good. And people tend to focus in on the percent of kids who test proficient. So in the green, and the upper group represents about half of all the kids in charter schools. You can see there's schools with a lot proficient. And then you go down and you see there are a bunch of schools where they, they're all saying, well, we're better than the district. But to me, that's like saying you can outrun a 2-year-old. I mean, the district isn't a point of comparison. But what people don't focus on is the percentage of kids who are below basic, which means they're 3 or 4 years behind. I mean, how can you have a 4th grader who's 3 years behind? And so again, you can see the best schools are getting all their kids out of below basic at least. And you got a group of schools who are mired down there. And it's the Rochester Academy Charter School that's the school we're working in, trying to turn around. And while many board members don't see, the discouraging part of all of this is that the weakest teams are the most impervious to help. They simply don't have the vision or discipline to carry out a consistent program and to get all their stuff on board pulling in the same direction. They don't even seem to know how bad they are or whatever. And so one of our big efforts is waking them up, saying, look, you could do much better. I mean, it's a shame because the charter school model allows the schools all the freedoms and everything they need to be successful. But of course, you got to do the job. And it's if you don't do the job, you don't get a good result. Eventually, the worst performing schools get closed, but only after a cohort of students has gone through and are left with inadequate skills as a result. So when I'm asked what keeps me going through all the disappointments and setbacks, my answer is the kids. I could walk away from the adults in the city any day, but I can't walk away from kids in need. I can see so many kids turning their lives around, and I know we can do more. I feel really good about Virtus. It now has about 340 young men enrolled. On average, coming from the district into the 9th grade, they tested a low 5th grade level, with some of them testing at 2nd and 3rd grade in both reading and math. We put them in teams of 18 boys with a full-time staff member we call a preceptor. He's not the teacher, he is the father figure we give them to lead them to success. And he spends an hour a day on character and planning for life and what it means to be a good man and what happens out in the workplace and how you have to behave and dress and so forth. And then half of the instruction is done online in learning labs, and there's both a special ed teacher and a content teacher in the room, but the kids are backed up to wherever you are. And in the district, in 9th grade, you're in algebra class. In our school, if you don't know fractions or you don't know what a percent is, we teach you fractions. And how do we get you to algebra if we don't teach you? So we try and fill in all the gaps. And they got to get an 80 on every quiz before they can move forward, or else they recycle through the material. And so you know they're actually mastering the subject. And each student moves at his own pace. But the amazing thing is once they start, everybody's got at least an 80 average by definition. And once they start getting good grades, first it's anger. You know, I was told I was stupid. I was told I couldn't learn. But then all of a sudden their attitude's 180 degrees and they just shoot forward. They gain anywhere from a year and a half to 2 years of learning per year. Nearly 80% of the staff members are people of color, and nearly 80% are male. And our discipline system is very structured. You can see the kids lining up, go from class to class, single file, not without talking. Here they're waiting to get into one of the learning labs. There's no pushing, shoving, fighting. But our whole discipline system is based on love and caring, and not punishment. No adult ever raises their voice to a child. And it's funny, when you ask the kids about the difference between Virtus and their previous schools, they don't describe learning labs or preceptors. What they say is that at this school, the adults really care for me and they won't let me fail. It's hard to find one photo that sums it up, but I picked this to show you what inner city teenage boys can be and do given the right mentoring. So I'd like to just close with a comment and a couple of questions. Rick Ackerley's book, What Schools Can Be, makes the point that our public education system is culturally determined. And it was designed 120 years ago as a sorting system to identify the few who would be leaders and the masses who would be workers and needed training on civic behavior more than academics. What's really sad in cities like Rochester is the Black and Hispanic students come pre-sorted. The system just assumes that such children simply can't learn because of poverty. So the poor academic achievement is exactly what we should expect. And why would you want us to change or do any better? I think these low expectations and complacency are the worst form of discrimination. And they're what we're really fighting in our effort. Let me share with you part of an email I got on December 6th from a former Virtus student, a young man named Jakeith Mosley. Hello, Mr. Hickman, it's Jakeith. I hope this message finds you well. In 2 weeks, I'll be welcoming my baby girl into the world. Additionally, I'm preparing for my real estate exam, working at the Academy of Health Sciences Charter School in operational support. And at Alfred State College, I'm pursuing a major in business management, set to graduate either early 2026 or possibly in 2025, December. My interests have expanded to encompass travel, entrepreneurship, and financial stability for my family. if there's an opportunity when I can lend a hand, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm truly grateful for the significant impact you've had on me. Warm regards, Keith. That's what keeps me going. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Brian. I believe we would all agree that you should be congratulated for your perseverance and the many successful outcomes you've had with the inner city students in Rochester. And as we go to breakout rooms, I believe that Brian would like to hear about some of your knowledge or experience with public schools in your community, and if charter schools play a role. So when we go to breakout, if you can talk about that a bit, and then maybe have some answers when we get back to the plenary session. Alan, you can stop the recording.
Let me see, Alan, you'll have to start the recording again.
Just did it. We're good.
So if I see everybody's muted again, if we can unmute, if you raise your hand, if you have a question, I'll call on you. If you want to make a comment to Brian, particularly from educators, it'd be very helpful to him. And I'll try to follow the reactions at the bottom part of your screen. If you raise your hand, then it's pretty clear you want to speak. Bob Conway?
Actually,
That's Rick Ackerley.
Rick Ackerley,
yeah, there are two Bob Conways today because he gave me
Double your
the
pleasure.
link. He gave me the link. Yeah.
Right.
Well, our group, one of the themes in our group is that charter schools. What charter schools do is they give you an opportunity to be liberated from the pyramid culture of most public schools, but that's still required. That just because you're a charter school doesn't mean you're going to be a good school. It all depends on the quality of the leadership. That was a theme that came out of our little group.
Right.
Harry John Huffnagel has his hand up.
I see you, John.
Yeah, Brian, one of the things that we were just talking about, how do you get something like this really started with the initial parents in terms of starting up a charter school? There's politics involved, and there's, trying to get the group together as well, to get this off the ground. And I think I'm just amazed by what you've been able to do. And it's, how do you pull in the group to say, okay, let's get going?
You're muted, Brian.
Still muted.
Come on, Brian, the charter school
There you go.
goes to the bottom left. That's
There
it.
we go. I see in the charter movement sort of two kinds of groups starting schools. And one is just people who don't know what they're doing and just say, we ought to start a school, and we maybe an all boys grade school, or maybe something that focuses on STEM or something would be good. And they work to get a charter, and then they go hire people to run the school. And I see a lot of them not doing very well. I think the best schools have some good educators on their team from day one, who've got a real vision of, here's what a really good school looks like, here's how you put the pieces in place. And then they get involved with a group of citizens. Would you put your kid here? So that and they go through the whole writing of the charter application, which is very extensive in New York. But they come in with energy and knowledge and how to do it. And that's the advantage I had with Virtus, that I had a pair of school leaders, husband and wife, who had been running good schools and already had their model figured out and had been around the country, and they were picking the best features of other schools to come up with the model for Virtus. And the real key, the trouble we had with Virtus was we were so different from other schools. A lot of parents were skeptical. I mean, they'd be asking, my kid's in ninth grade, why isn't he taking the algebra Regents exam? And our answer is, he may take it in 10th or 11th grade, but he'll pass it. You know, what we got to do is teach him math. And then we'll have a really high rate of passing. But there's no point in taking an algebra class if you can't do the work. And now we have a wait list. Now we have parents in the community who understand what it is. So it takes time to build a good school, but you really got to hit the road running day one, or you get behind the 8 ball very fast. As you say, I like to say the word charter is like the word restaurant. You know, they're good restaurants, they're bad restaurants. You know, you got to do the work to make it work. Did that answer you, or you?
It does, Brian. I think it's what you're saying is you're going to start out with educators working directly with you to make sure that the operations have some sort of charge to it from people who know how to do this, rather than just having a group of people saying, hey, our school is lousy, let's start a charter school. They're the more successful ones with educators involved.
That's right. People really know what they're up to.
Don Brown?
Brian, how do you have lots of applicants? You showed us on your slide the number of applicants before. How do you make a decision as to who gets to be in that charter school?
Well, it's a lottery.
Straight up lottery?
There's a lottery that's run early April for all the schools. We run the whole system, so we run the lottery for all the schools, and then offers are sent out to the kids who are selected. Now, some kids apply to 2 or 3 schools, so they may get accepted at 2. And if they accept 1, then the offer from the other school gets rescinded and the next person in line gets it. And after April 1st, it's first come, first serve. So if a school didn't fill up with the lottery, then it's just the order in which you show up. But there's no selection, there's no picking one kid over the other. And the beauty is, you know, New York City, where they're capped, they sometimes have 5 times as many people applying as get in. So researchers can follow the kids who got in and the ones who didn't get in and watch, and it proves that it's the school that makes the difference. You know, people say, well, you got all the motivated parents. Well, the parents who applied but didn't get in are just as motivated, and their kids don't do any better in the district schools than the other kids. So it's clearly, we can prove that the schools make the difference.
Jim Allen, you had your hand up. Do you want to talk to Brian?
Well, from earlier conversations, I think that Brian mentioned that he did some innovative things that I'm not sure quite came out. Like he was sure that every kid came to that school got breakfast and lunch. Am I right on that, Brian?
Absolutely.
And you had things like there weren't classes on Friday afternoon. All the teachers got together and talked about what was working for them and what wasn't working for them. And teachers in ordinary schools get no feedback. They've got their certificate, they're on their own, and they get no feedback or very little throughout their career. And so there were all kinds of systems that Brian innovated, it sounded like to me, that helped to ensure the success for these kids.
Yeah, we collect a lot of data. At Virtus, the preceptor is almost like a father figure. So we run into a lot of homelessness, and we find them a place to live. We don't say, well, when you leave school, you're out of here. The preceptors visit every house every month. So they know where is the kid, what's the situation at home, what's going on with the child. And in the morning, so the whole idea was to have every child has a strong relationship with some adult in the school that he knows really cares about him. So he can open up and share his problems and get help. And that's all part, you go back and look at the first dictionary of Mr. Webster in the 1820s, and his definition of education is all the necessary things to raise a child to be a productive citizen. And it's not just learning ABC. So yeah, and the point is there's enough money, we can do it. This idea we can't afford to do this stuff, of course we can afford it. So thank you, Jim.
Larry,
I want to follow up on that, Brian. Does any charter school in Rochester or any that you know of have a requirement in the application where the parents must participate in the child's education by a certain amount of meetings with the teacher or the school?
New York state law doesn't allow you to require that. I mean, there's some schools that sort of come up with an informal contract, they try and get the parent to agree to do that stuff, but they can't enforce it. And what we found at Virtus was we can't make the child's success in life depend on whether the parent shows up or not at parents' night or anything else. We're responsible for the child, and we got to go out of our way. So we don't send report cards home with the child. At parents' night, the parents who show up sit with a teacher and discuss it. And if they don't show up, we go to their house and we talk with them about it. We don't just let them go. So you can't force them. You can't have a school that depends on parent involvement. We have the kid, we're responsible. We got to do everything that's needed.
But it is a parent or guardian that fills out the application for a charter school. Am I correct?
A guardian of some sort. Yeah, it could be a grandmother, a foster home. Yeah. And we have a helpline. So people who are trying to fill it out, if you don't have internet or you don't know how to do it, they call up and we do it for them.
Ron?
Yeah, so the old saw is that in institutions, but the shadow of one man or one woman, what's the succession plan? What happens in 10 years? Is something in place that when you disappear, this is going to continue?
Yeah, so I'll say on the chart on Virtus, I have rotated off the board.
Okay.
It's not healthy to have one person dominating the board for years and years and years. So we had a succession plan, and there's a rotation that nobody's board chair for more than about 3 years. My organization, Exceptional, which is the support, we're trying to provide the same supports to the charter schools that a large charter management organization would give for something like KIPP or Uncommon Schools. And that's why we brought Seabrun Johnson in, because he's 20 years younger than I am. He's very well connected. I think it's fortunate that there's a local organization that gives away about $24 million a year. And they've got a new person in charge of grants whose sister runs one of the charter schools. And so Seabrun's becoming best friends with them. And I don't know, we run into this, but we have a supporter who this year gave us $350,000. He's given us $250,000, 300,000, 300,000, 350. He's a neighbor of ours. And we keep him anonymous because we don't want to know everybody going asking for money. But he's turns 81, I think, this year. And so we got to keep getting new sources of money support. And so Seabrun, we have a succession plan that if I disappear tomorrow, both exceptional and the schools keep going.
Okay.
I have a question, Brian. You show in these charts performance comparison with the district schools. Is the fact that the charter schools seem to be improving, does that push the district schools to get better?
Well, I think in some cities it has, but the politics in Rochester are absolutely toxic. And the head of the union has been the head of the union for more than 40 years.
Oof.
He's publicly stated that if the kids paid dues, I'd care about them. A great attitude from an educator, but they don't pay dues. My job is to make sure that no teacher is ever fired, no matter how bad they are. And, but I do believe that as we get more people, the one thing that the politicians are beginning to catch on to is, and the funny thing is, they believe that the charter parents are more motivated. I don't think they really are. They're just desperate. But if we got 40% of the kids, and in the school board and city council elections, the decision gets made in the primary, and only 5,000 or 6,000 people vote. If we could turn out 4,000 charter school parents in June for the primary, we could take over the politics. And I think a number of city councilmen are beginning to catch on that the union money may not buy them votes anymore. And I think there's just an awful lot of good teachers who are just so frustrated in the district. You talk with the teachers and they're saying and so I think there could be a change in the next few years when if we can keep going this way.
Harry Klee has had his hand up several times, Harry.
Go ahead, Howie.
Yeah, I'm curious what the reaction has been, and you've commented on it a bit from the unions in terms of, do they recognize that that these charter schools are actually accomplishing something that they're not? And are they actively interfering or just keeping out of the way, or what are they doing?
Yeah, so the union is a vicious, active, at least in Rochester, active opponent. So the district is going to close 11 school buildings at the end of this year. And the school buildings revert to the city. And the union has a huge campaign that no charter school should ever be allowed to get one of these buildings. They should be turned into apartment houses. They should be turned into businesses. I mean, they're actually trying to get something through the city council to prohibit when these buildings are sold that anybody except a charter school can buy it. So that's the level of vitriol. And of course, they claim we're ruining public education. But if you only got 10% of the kids proficient, what's their input? I mean, and when a child moves in New York State from a district school to a charter school, the state gives the district $17,000 of quote transition aid to make up for what they're losing the first year. And then the budget goes up every year. So if the charter schools get 65% of the money per pupil, it means that every time somebody moves to a charter school, the district has more money per pupil for the remaining. Rochester now has more than $33,000 per pupil.
Jeez.
They have, think about it, a classroom of 30 kids, you got $1 million. You can't teach 30 kids to read for $1 million. I mean, it's scandalous.
Yeah.
Tell us your line again when you said, when the superintendent said you're not an educator. What did you say to him?
You're not either.
You're not either. I love
You're
that.
not much of an educator. Geez.
Harry,
Educator.
Bill Taylor has his hand up.
I can see. Go ahead, Bill.
Let me unmute here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering, are the parents responsible for getting the kids to and from school, or do you have your own buses, et cetera? You know, I think the travel would be a big expense and potential roadblock.
So it turns out that in Rochester, the bus system serves all students, both district and charter students. So every kid gets a ride. It's a little funny. You got to live more than a mile away from the school to get a ride. Otherwise, you're supposed to walk. And the district gives the parents some choice of which district school they go into. And the parents all choose schools on the other side of the city from where they live in order to get the bus ride. And so they're spending $80 million a year busing kids around. And if they just give them a ride down the street to the, and they've destroyed neighborhood schools, and they could do it all for 35 million if they just give them a ride. I mean, the whole system is so irrational. The taxpayer is not, well, the city schools are nearly all supported by the state. There's only about 100 million of a $1 billion budget that comes from local tax revenue. And in New York State, no local revenue ever goes to a charter school. It's all state money.
John Ladd had a question.
Yeah, I was interested in what is the funding source for the charter schools? Is it entirely state money, or is there another source too?
No, the charter schools are entirely state money. It gets funneled through the district, but it's pass-through money. If the district doesn't give it to you, you can appeal, and New York State Ed will make them give it to you. So yeah, it's all state funded. And we do some fundraising for the schools, but our attitude is the average charter school in Rochester, you add in the value of the busing and the food and the school nurses and stuff like that, comes around 18,000 bucks a kid, which is more than the average school in America gets. And you shouldn't have to raise money. If you're a good manager, you ought to be able to run a good school on that. So
And what was the number that you said for the public schools? Dollar per student?
Pardon?
What the public schools in Rochester are getting, how much per student?
Well, of course, they'll argue this, but if you subtract all the money that goes to charter schools, adult ed, prisons, all the special programs, it comes to about 33,000 bucks a kid.
Okay.
And we're doing it on 18,000.
That's the numbers I wanted. Thanks.
Go ahead, Beth.
One of the big problems with the charter schools outside New York City is that they get nothing for facilities. So it's a huge expense to find a building to put these schools into.
Oh. So this 13,000 or whatever you said per student doesn't cover.
No, so we
Capital
have to,
costs.
there's $1 billion 3-year budget for facilities, renovation and improvement for district schools, but there's not a single penny that comes to a charter school for facilities. That's why I ended up personally guaranteeing all these loans, and we invested, we've got about $1 million into these schools over the, we don't plan, I'm out, I can't do this anymore money-wise. But I just felt we had to step up and do what we had to do at the time that either we had the school or we didn't have it. So I did what we needed to get the school. But no, facilities is a huge issue, and it's very political, and it's nasty. And Bill Bursight was talking about Milwaukee in our breakout room. The man named Howard Fuller used to be head of schools there, superintendent, and then he quit and became a charter school champion. And he's a fabulous old man in the charter movement. And so I heard him being interviewed recently, and somebody tried to trip him up and said, yeah, but what do you think about the district schools? And his answer was, I don't think about them at all. I just think about the kids I got in my school. And so that's what we don't want to be in a battle with the district. Nothing I'd love more than have the district be high performing. I care about the kids.
Yeah, sure.
And every kid matters. And I don't care whether it's a district school, a charter school, parochial school, whatever. It's the kids. And I don't want to be in that battle. If we got 8,500 kids in charter schools and half of them aren't getting the education they deserve, then my responsibility is to work as hard as I can for those kids, because that's what I can actually impact.
Larry, do you have a question, comment?
I had a quick one. I don't know whether you talked in the breakout rooms, comparative salary and benefit structures for teachers in the public school versus the charter schools.
Again, I can only speak to Rochester. In the first 10 years of a district school teacher, you sort of have the hockey stick. They earn in the mid 40s to 50,000 a year. And then the salaries start going up, and we can easily compete with that in the charter schools. A 30-year teacher in Rochester can make 130 grand a year, plus a benefit package about 45% of their base. We can't compete with that. But what's happened is the pension plan in the district system is now on tier 6. So brand new teachers teaching in the district doesn't get that wonderful pension plan. And tier 6 isn't much better than just a 401k plan or something else. So for new teachers, and I think the other thing is that the culture in a good charter school makes it just so much better place to teach. You see your kids learning, you work as teams, you're in and out of each other's classrooms. The district, they're only allowed to observe a teacher twice a year for 20 minutes each time. How in the world do you run a good school if you can't even go in the classroom and coach the teacher? I mean, you wouldn't hire a lawyer who's come out of law school and the senior people that aren't giving him any coaching on how to handle your case.
Sure you would.
Yeah.
In Kansas City.
Yeah. So I guess I just want to be if there are any takeaways for me, this is a solvable problem. And it's something that people like us can do, even though our career years may be over. That charter schools are desperate for good board members. And what they need are board members who just have good judgment and who press for excellence, who hold the board hires the school leader, and it's their job to be sure there's a good school leader in place and then to support them. And it can be really rewarding to do this.
Blondie?
I think we're about the end of our hour plus, but I just like on behalf of our group, we had 37 folks participating, and we want to thank you for your financial and leadership commitment, particularly the focus on the children, how to do the best for the kids, which, as you say, politics of education don't always focus on that. And you guys in the charter school movement are certainly doing it. So congratulations.
Yeah, well,
Much so.
Amen.
Can I turn this back to John? John Huffnagel, talk about the future of Zoom sessions.
So we've been having a great time getting things ready. And Bryan, thank you very much. That was really just a great presentation, and really sort of opens up what what we're going to be doing some in the future in education. Our next one, Lenny is here, Lenny Goldberg, and he is going to be our next participant on February 15th. And his theme is It's a Different Path. And he was radicalized at Williams and forged in Berkeley, and then working within the system to affect progressive change. And he's done an amazing job of that over the years in California. And I think there's a great story and many great stories he's going to be able to tell us for that one. And we're looking forward to that. And Rick Ackerley is going to be talking to us in March. And Rick wants to talk about his experiences in education and really accessible anecdotes which are considered part of how you teach and how do you deliver an effective education. And certainly Rick is an expert in that particular field. And we're going on, and we really have 3 more, I think, that are coming that are going to be very interesting ones. And we as a group have had a great time putting this together, and it's just so appreciate how many people have stepped in and become a part of this. And I think we all get something out of it in terms of understanding our own classmates and the lives that we've led, and just how important it is to stay connected. And I just want to thank you all for joining in with us, and please, we'll keep you posted. We've got a whole list of things coming, and we're excited about it. So hopefully you will be too. Thanks,
So
everybody.
Stay
Thank you.
warm, and stay safe.
Hey,
So
Gordy,
thank you.
where are you coming from with a bow tie?
Oh, there you are.
Thanks, Brian and Beth. Thanks, Beth, for being by his
Yes.
side. That's great.
Ryan, how many times did she kick you?
And now my shins have survived. Yeah.
He's been
Well,
a good boy.
thank you both, and thank everybody for being with us tonight. It was just great.
So
Great.
how you got electricity there up in Maine? I thought you were out.
Well, we're not out of electricity, but we had 6 trucks working over the weekend, this last weekend, because we had some severe damage all along the coast of Maine, and
Ouch.
unfortunately, a lot of the damage has been in the lobster industry and in the fishing industry, piers and all that kind of stuff. It's a tough.
Where in Maine are you?
I'm in Owl's Head.
We're in Brunswick.
Oh, you are, Chuck. Yeah. This up in this in our area, we really had some tough.
Thanks for doing these, guys. These are
Thank you.
wonderful.
Yeah, thank you very
Very,
much.
thank you very much for tonight. Appreciate
take
all
care.
your work.
Good looking sweater, Blondie.
Yep. You guys,
Night,
all your
everybody.
the purples are there. That's really great stuff.
Yeah,
Night, everybody.
someone has to keep up the tradition.
Nice to
Great
see
job,
you.
Brian.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.